World War II was a horrible war that cost many lives, both American, Russian, German, British, and otherwise. When World War II finally ended after America dropped nuclear missiles on Japan, the world was celebrating, but none celebrated more than America, finally happy that one of the worst wars to ever afflict the globe had ended. And with it, celebration, amnesty, happiness was gifted to the majority of the population. This developed into a new age, an age of rebellion, an age of the flappers, an age of happiness, as we started to develop more than we had ever developed before, and reach an age where the people were more prideful in their country and more optimistic about the future than ever, having finally been yanked under the yoke of World War II. However, as happiness often is, we could not be satisfied with just victory. We had to do something else. So, America, as a country, started something new. Something that put us at odds with someone else. We began the space race. The space race was a race between America and the Soviet Union to put the first man on the moon. Well, initially it was just to put a man into space when the Soviet Union had beaten America into making a transport vessel reach space. We quickly had to find a new solution. So, we, together as a country, sent a small crew with one very important man, Neil Armstrong, to the moon. And upon that landing began one of the most trying times for our country. It began the reality that was the Cold War. The Cold War was a trying time because of the nuclear missiles that were possessed by all countries and the arms race that quickly developed to consume about everything. Submarines, such as this Soviet Union submarine of the time, pictured here, were used to transport missiles and other explosive devices covertly underwater, which kept everyone in danger and everyone afraid of sudden nuclear strikes from the sea. Nuclear strikes that were close off the coast could potentially impact even as close in the country as the Midwest from the eastern coast. These missiles were highly dangerous, and of course were fired at the end of World War II. These nuclear missiles were a product of the Manhattan Project, developed mainly to be a weapon to end all war. Little did we know that the missile would cause more problems than it had solved. It may have ended World War II, but with the cost of many lives and the destruction of much property. These missiles were eventually developed by other countries other than America, including Britain, China, Japan, and most importantly at the time, the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union and America mass-produced these missiles in such large quantities that they could cover about half the Earth in atomic fire. As the Cold War got worse and worse, bits and pieces of every country had to turn and take a side, or less be swept up in the destruction. America, South America, Africa, and most of Western Europe was allied with the United States, while the Soviet Union, China, Japan, and most of the eastern seaboard allied in a communist union against America, as America was a capitalist union against Soviet Russia. The main purpose of this was an arms race, to be the first one to develop the most weapons and be ahead in the world superpower. Of course, one of the problems with this was convincing the public that such an arms race was necessary. After the end of World War II, people wanted peace, not more war and further aggression. One of the few recourses the American political system had was propaganda. Soon, images like this were publicized all across America, threatening the people and making them believe that had we not fought communism, we would eventually succumb to it. There was some basis in this fear, as many countries of the time on the eastern coast of Asia were turning to communism, but it was not a reason to fear. It was produced as a reason to fear. People were afraid. It was a very real fear at the time. Children were told to practice techniques, including hiding under desks and running to bomb shelters in the event that the sirens would go on, and then they would have to run from possible missiles, maybe even nuclear warheads. It was an abysmal time for the country, with fear at an all-time high and racism against those who believed in communism, mainly Russians, Japanese, and Chinese. It was a horrible time for the country, and it almost escalated into nuclear war. This is what we avoided. It could have very easily, when the Russian submarine entered American waters and was told that it had 1 hour to leave American waters or be declared an act of war, this could have been our reality. Had the Russian submarine not left American waters, the submarine most likely would have fired its nuclear missile on an American city, resulting in an incredible loss of life. Of course, this missile strike would not go unanswered, and America would have answered with its own missiles. Missiles would fly from America at the Soviet Union, and soon most of the Soviet Union would return fire as well. China and Japan would also unleash their Slavo, as well as anyone else who had a nuclear missile on the planet, for fear of being hit themselves in hopes to destroy their enemies first. The entire world would have been purged in nuclear fire, and at least 80% of the world's population may have died. Those surviving would find themselves in a world with no civilization, no organization. It would have been the bleakest times in the history of the world. These images show some possible results of this destruction. We were so close to losing everything, just because of our hatred towards enemies we didn't understand, and towards values we couldn't comprehend, simply because they were different from our own. Perhaps, had we listened better, learned more, and were free from ignorance, we may be able to avoid this fate in the future, for it will come again.
Do you know